And the forum will now hear the next voluntary national review, which is of Ghana. And I invite His Excellency Nii Moi Thompson, Chair of the National Development Planning Commission and Senior Advisor to the President of Ghana on the United Nations, to make a presentation. Excellency, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, distinguished delegates, and esteemed colleagues. It is both an honor and a privilege to stand before you today on behalf of the Republic of Ghana. As we gather at this high-level political forum, I'm deeply mindful of our shared commitment to the 2030 agenda. Today, I'll present Ghana's third voluntary national review, a testament to our commitment to identifying challenges of implementation, dealing with them decisively, and leaving no one behind. Ghana's path towards sustainable development is guided by three pillars: participation, inclusivity, and acceleration. In this presentation, we will share our progress based on these pillars on 5 goals that the United Nations recommended for the VNR assessment this year, namely Goal 3, which has to do with health, Goal 5, which deals with issues of gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls, Goal 8, which is economic growth and job creation and decent work, Goal 14, which is to conserve and sustainably use the oceans, seas, and marine resources for sustainable development, and Goal 17, which is to strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. This is being done while reaffirming our dedication to the principle of, quote, leave no one behind. We'll also outline Ghana's strategic priorities for the next 5 years, anchored in the vision of His Excellency the President, John Dramani Mahama, who has stated, and I quote, "We remain committed to achieving the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals at all costs." Now, participation and inclusivity. The implementation of the SDGs in Ghana is a collective endeavor. Through our whole of government and whole of society approach, we have engaged a broad spectrum of stakeholders, from the private sector and civil society to local governments, persons with disability, the youth, and our development partners. This inclusive process, strengthened by political leadership and rigorous data validation, ensures that our policies are not only reflective of our people's needs, but also grounded in evidence. Outcome of Ghana's 2019 and 2022 VNRs. Our previous voluntary national reviews laid a strong foundation for progress. Through an enhanced coordination with civil society and the UN system, we translated initiatives like the Joint SDG Fund and the SDG Investor Map from commitment to action. We also expanded our reporting capacity, increasing SDG indicator coverage from 66 in 2019 to 105 in 2025. These achievements underscore the power of partnership and peer learning in driving sustainable development in Ghana. I'll turn to highlights of progress. This year's VNR report provides comprehensive assessment of all 17 goals, enriched by insights from the previous reviews. But as previously stated, we will focus on 5 goals, that is Goal 3, 5, 8, 14, and 17. Goal 3, which deals with issues of health and well-being. On Goal 3, we celebrate measurable progress, such as skilled birth attendance nationally now stands at 87.6%, up from 73% in 2014, as well as child survival rates that continue to improve, with under 5 mortality rate decreasing from 60 in 2014 to 40 in 2022 towards the SDG targets of 2025. While neonatal mortality declined from 29 to 17 deaths per 1,000 live births over the same period, compared to a target of 12 in the SDGs. Overall maternal mortality ratio remains unacceptably high, unfortunately, at 4 times more than the global target, while MMR in urban areas decreased from 271 in 2010 to 233 in 2021. That of rural areas regrettably increased from 364 to 374, with the Upper East region of Ghana recording the highest maternal mortality ratio. This disparity compels us to redouble our efforts in healthcare infrastructure and equitable service delivery. In the case of non-communicable diseases, it currently accounts for over 40% of all deaths, although marginal declines have been recorded over the period in this incidence. On Goal 5, which is the achievement of gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls, gender equality remains the cornerstone of Ghana's development agenda. The passage of the Affirmative Action Law in 2024 and Ghana having its first female Vice President, Professor Nana Jane Adjuman Opoku Adjuman, marks a critical step towards empowering women in leadership. Today, over 30% of high-level judicial and administrative roles are held by women. Girls married before age 15 and 18 declined by 2.5% and 2.9% respectively in the last 4 years. And more than 30% of women make their own decisions regarding their health. While these are notable achievements, the persistent gender gaps in earnings and other economic indicators between men and women reminds us that our work is far from over. On Goal 8, which is to promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth while promoting full and productive employment as well as decent work for all, our economy has shown a lackluster performance in recent years. The decline of our GDP growth per capita hit a low of 0.4% in 2024, below the 2016 level. Youth unemployment remains a pressing challenge, despite a decline in the proportion of young people who are not in education, employment, or training from 28.3% in the first quarter of 2022 to 19.7% in the first quarter of 2023. Our strategy considers a 3D approach to measuring economic growth through growth in GDP, growth in employment, and growth in earnings, driven by productivity enhancing measures and labor market reforms that promote and uphold the tenets of decent work. On Goal 14, Ghana's ratification of the World Trade Organization's Fisheries Agreement in 2025 aimed at curbing illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing demonstrates our commitment to sustainable ocean governance. I must mention that Ghana is also a member of the Ocean Panel. While our Ocean Health Index score has improved from 63.26 in 2021 to 65 out of 100, the annual dumping of 250,000 tons of plastic waste into the Atlantic Ocean demands urgent action. Through measures like seasonal fishing closures, marine conservation initiatives, and Ghana's role in the Ocean Panel, we are working to safeguard our marine ecosystems for future generations. And then lastly, on Goal 17, domestic revenue mobilization is improving through strengthened partnerships, digital reforms, and enhanced tax administration. Ghana's total revenue relative to economic output or gross domestic product, GDP, averaged 15%, has averaged 15% since 2016. From the period 2016 to 2023, government revenue was driven by taxes from income and property, as well as taxes on domestic goods and services. Government expenditure financed by domestic taxes has also improved significantly from 50% in 2016 to 71% in 2023. Fixed broadband subscriptions have nearly quadrupled since 2019, reflecting growing global connectivity. In terms of vital statistics, death registration rates have significantly improved from 18% in 2016 to more than 37% in 2022. Yet, to fully realize the SDGs, we must strengthen data systems and domestic revenue mobilization. These efforts are critical to ensuring that no one is left behind in our digital and economic landscape. And then lastly, looking ahead, Ghana is committed to bold action. A $10 billion investment in infrastructure is already on the way, and green transition and nature-based solutions will help to lay the groundwork for the next 5 years. Chairman, Excellencies, I thank you for your attention.
I thank His Excellency the Chair of the National Development Planning Commission and Senior Advisor to the President of Ghana on the United Nations for the presentation. It was very detailed and informative. Now we go to the Africa Regional Mechanism of the major groups and the other stakeholders, our NGO partner.
The Ghana Civil Society applaud the government of Ghana on its sustained commitment in promoting the Sustainable Development Goals and for presenting its third National Voluntary Review Report and all the successes and efforts showed. There are, however, some challenges that need to be addressed. One, there is the need to implement the affirmative action measures and review the Persons with Disability Act to align with the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities to tackle exclusion, gender parity, unemployment, education, among others. The health sector needs to be strengthened. There is the need to focus more on immunization financing, eye health, preparedness of public health emergency, and equitable primary health care, especially for the underprivileged. Strong and robust institutions is vital to ensure accountability, transparency, and the voices of the people, as well as effective debt management. We urge the government to prioritize the inclusive implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals and monitoring mechanisms. The Sustainable Development Goals can be achieved when we are intentional and focus on equity and human rights for all. We, the civil society organizations, pledge our unwavering support and collaboration to ensure that the promise of the Sustainable Development and Inclusive Goals is achieved. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the Africa Regional Mechanism of the major groups and other stakeholders. And now I give the floor to the delegation of Ghana.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And thanks for all those who put the questions to us. With respect to Czech Republic and the distinction between beneficiaries and contributors as it relates to youth, we already have far-reaching efforts to ensure precisely that, so that they are not just beneficiaries but active participants in the development process. In the area of education, for example, we have the flagship free senior high school program and ongoing reforms in technical and vocational education, which is to empower them to be able to take active roles in the economy. There are also other programs for skills development, again, in relation to empowering them. We have what is known as a Juma Rap entrepreneurship program for the youth, and then we have Coders, 1 Million Coders initiative, as a reflection of our interest in the digital era and giving them the necessary skills to participate in the national development process. And so there's a whole range of issues. Much later we can share detailed information on that with you. With respect to CSO's positions, we've taken note of the concerns raised and this pledge to support our initiatives in that regard. We will engage with them further for more detailed proposals as to how we can work together. With respect to Denmark, I must acknowledge their commendation and also to thank them for their continuing support. On the question of green economic development and youth employment, our policies are aligned with what we call the directive principles of state policy within our constitution, which mandates the government to pursue policies that then engender equitable development and decent livelihoods for all our citizens. And these are prioritized in our medium-term development plans. On the matter of human rights in Ghana, Ghana remains committed to upholding the inherent dignity and rights of all persons as guaranteed under Chapter 5 of our 1992 Constitution, particularly Article 12(2), which ensures the protection of the fundamental rights and freedoms of all Ghanaians without any kind of discrimination. And this, again, informs the various policies that we initiate in Ghana. With respect to the question from the UK, we are mindful of that. Indeed, we do highlight interventions that we view to be catalytic beyond the direct areas that we intervene in. In terms of data systems, the National Planning Commission works directly with not directly, but also closely with the Ghana Statistical Service, which is represented here. And it's a testament to the success of this collaboration that we've actually increased the number of indicators from 66 to 105. We'll continue to work on that. The same approach with financial systems, especially with online banking. We now have more data that we can easily drill into to be able to reach the less banked or the unbanked segments of the population. And then with respect to innovation, we are combining both technological innovation and non-technological innovation, such as improvements in systems that lead to more efficient and effective results. With respect to Sierra Leone, it's a very, very important question in terms of the size of the informal sector and what needs to be done to reduce that, because the informal sector generally has very low productivity and therefore low incomes. As I speak with you, we are contemplating the enactment of a comprehensive formalization program that will bring in the informal sector to more formal systems, and also technologies, exposure, markets, and so forth. And therefore, their output and productivity will rise accordingly, which then will create a wider tax base for those in that sector. But the focus is not really on taxing them, but rather boosting their productivity. And once that is done, implicitly, you then have a basis for taxation. When you go in there mentioning taxes, there's a tendency to actually scare people away, and it defeats the purpose of formalization. National health insurance, it covers all Ghanaians, both those in the formal and informal sector. So it depends on the individual to take advantage of the coverage, the services that the program offers. And then with youth employment and data use, as well as domestic and international financing schemes, in the presentation I mentioned the 3D approach to measuring economic growth. So in this case, we're not just tracking unemployment, but we will also be tracking the economy's capacity to absorb new entrants into the labor force, what we call the absorption rate. This is a new approach that we're using to give us finer details of how the economy is creating jobs and where it is creating jobs and the types of jobs that it is creating. And lastly, in the presentation, I did mention the efforts to boost the tax GDP ratio. The government itself has policies, specifically the Ministry of Finance has policies and strategies in place. And so far, there's been some limited success, but we aim to build on that to expand that. Thank you very much.
I thank the presenters from Ghana for their